What are the characteristics of being Australian? What is unique to Australia is our First Nations history. If Australia is your home, well, these are your people. You can enjoy that as part of your proud history to be Australian. Like, why haven't we celebrated that narrative? That's powerful. Aboriginal people and Torres Strait Islander people want to work side by side with Australians to celebrate a day that we all can celebrate, to work together towards better conditions for everyone. I get to honour my mother and my grandmother every day with what we're doing. Now we're the generation that are going to be part of this healing and change.
Excellent. JB, John Burgess, welcome to the In Depth and In Focus podcast. It's good to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, boys.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Yeah.
Welcome. We've got to just clarify for our listeners, you are the real John Burgess. You're not that imposter from Burgo's catchphrase.
Yeah, definitely. I got that all when growing up. Yeah, definitely the real JB. Wheel of Fortune.
Yeah.
No.
Every time I tell someone that I've got a friend called John Burgess, they're like,
no.
oh, Burgo's catchphrase.
Yes.
I'm like, nah, this is the real JB.
Yeah. He's an imposter.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So you're a proud Gurindji man?
Yeah.
Did I get the pronunciation right?
Yeah. Gurindji. I don't know that's why I pronounce it, but.
And you're also the founder and director of Little Rocket, which is 100% owned and operated First Nations creative marketing agency.
Yep.
And you're also the First Nations director at Tag Worldwide.
Yep.
And last but not least, you're also the co-founder of First Nations Network.
Yeah. Yep. A lot on.
That's a big intro. I was just going to say he's a big cat video enthusiast.
I'm known for my my enthusiasm around cat TikToks.
Yeah. Every now and then I wake up with a TikTok from JB and it's a cat DJing or something.
It's too good. The content's too good.
I'm like, why are you still awake at 1 a.m? He's like, TikTok homework.
Yeah, it's research, market research.
Yeah. So just a bit on your plate then.
Yeah. That's my unwind.
So we're quite excited to get into it. But just to go back a bit, I think Vinny and I think we met in 2017 and then you guys met in the next year, right?
Yeah. So just to give our listeners a bit of context, I got back from London and I was looking for freelance work and John was looking for a videographer at the time. And we met through a mutual friend and we realised we both had the same silliness and got along like a house on fire.
It's a vital ingredient.
Yeah, because we'd be, out doing shoots and edits together, long days on the road, regional Victoria, with quite some serious subject matter as well. But I think what I loved about you most is that you could still inject humour into it, which is so important. I think that's reflected in why your staff at Little Rocket and your team love you so much. So when we started working together, you were just working for yourself.
Yeah.
You had a little office space in Easy Street in one of the train carriages up on the building of Easy's. So I was at the point in my career where I was sort of ready to take that next leap and go out on my own. And you're like, hey, there's a bit of space in the train carriage if you want to come and work here. So came and worked with you, and the rest is history, really. We've gone from Easy Street to Wellington Street in Collingwood, now to this amazing space in Brunswick that we share with you and your team. So there's never a dull moment. But now you've got like 20 plus staff or something. So it's been incredible to see you grow over that time and in such a short space of time as well. So.
Yeah. It's those foundational relationships I find that have defined where we are today. So, Vinny and I on those long stretch drives and curating storytelling and conversations around First Nations content in particular. We through your work, we built a certain quality about that storytelling and delivery, which, Little Rocket is indebted to because that's built the AV capacity and offering today based off those founding principles of setup and storytelling and listening. We did a lot of listening, and I think that's important these days. into good storytelling.
Yeah, and you've definitely been a mentor for me in business and for Ty as well. So it's a pleasure to still be working in the same space with you.
Yeah.
Got lots of things to come. So, but yeah, today's not about us; it's about you. So we want to hear about your story.
But it is great to see where Third Space has gone to. A big plug. They're paying me.
But you didn't have a choice. You had to come on here.
Yeah, roll the ad. No, it's been really great to see what you guys are doing. Some amazing storytelling across some of those areas, mental health and, just hard content that, requires sensitivity, requires technique. And, kudos to you guys. It's good.
Thanks, mate.
That the family continues.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't get rid of us.
It's been wonderful.
So let's go back to the beginning and the childhood. Like, what was it like being raised in Australia, Melbourne?
I feel fortunate for my upbringing, given the great relationship I had with my mum and my sisters as well, and the house was always full of love, and that was very fortunate. But I guess it's the backdrop that defines a lot of our family in terms of trauma, not only from mum's side but from dad's. A lot of early childhood trauma that can play a big toll on children. We don't often know how, and it's only until you get older you start to see that manifest. Mum and dad carrying so much trauma. They split when I was just 5, and then moved to the outer eastern suburbs of Melbourne to start that new journey without dad. Was really hard for me. And mum was part of the stolen generation, so a Gurindji woman taken off country only when she was 2 years old, and then removed from not only a mother but a sister. Horrific trauma, abuse, physical, mental, emotional abuse. And dad was caught up in the Blitz in the Second World War, and we know all about how horrific that bombing period was of London, and he lost his father and his sister. Was then literally ran for a ship that was headed to Australia, where his uncle was, and for 3 months, you're on this ship, not like today, and then you're in some foreign country, and you've just lost your father and your sister. Really traumatic backdrop. So I always say, so that was a great decision to get together and have kids, but I guess dad was just found it too hard to deal with, and with mum, she just came to a point where she had to know who she was, what had happened to her, and so started our journey back to country and our journey to connect with community.
When we're growing up and we're going through that trauma, we're living through it, we don't always have the skills or the vocab to articulate and explain what we were feeling, what it felt like, or to understand what we were going through. But now you can always reflect.
That's it.
So if you had to think back now, did you really understand back then what was happening, or the fact that, because you're from an Indigenous family, that, you're being marginalized? Did you understand that back when you were a child?
Definitely not to the degree I do now, and when I was a little bit older. My father and my mother have just passed not too long ago, and especially with mum, it's only been a couple of months. But I recall a story that she used to say to me. She said, when her and my father broke up, she was very depressed, lost a lot of weight. And she would say to me, she said, for whatever reason, Johnny, you picked up on this, what was going on, and you'd constantly be giving me hugs. You'd be holding me. I don't know if that was something intentionally that I did when I was a kid, but she said it just felt like you knew what was going on and how I was struggling.
Strong sign of empathy.
Yeah, very strong in the family, given that background. I feel that. And she said that got me through. She said, that contact that just you sort of not requested, she didn't give anything out. I'd just come home from school, or I'd be lying or in the lounge, and I'd just want to hold her or give her a hug. And there's some photos from that time, and she looks really down, and there's me.
Yeah.
It's kind of coping, fight or flight mechanism maybe, but for me, reflecting on it now, like you say, I realised if I lost her, I'd lose everything. So Dad had already gone. Mum was from this broken background, and I thought, gee, if Mum's not okay, we're going to end up wards of the state here, and we'll go through the system. So now looking back, I'm like, that was probably me trying to just make sure everything's okay.
Don't leave me.
Yeah,
Don't leave me.
yeah.
Yeah.
We talk a
Really
lot
hard.
about intergenerational trauma.
Mm.
How did that sort of play a part in your childhood and growing up as your
Yeah.
mum was trying to connect back to culture?
Yeah, I think just the level of adversity that Mum and Dad had experienced start to play out. It's one thing to be taken away from your parents at such a young age and not know that, but then the deliberate approach to separation from your sister as well, and then thrown into not a comforting or warm family scenarios, you're thrown into a boys' home, and then from there you get fostered out to families where Mum was sexually abused, and so everything was just horrific. She didn't know what love was. The first things that I kind of felt around intergenerational trauma was the injustice that my mum had experienced. And it was in a boardroom meeting with a client through Little Rocket. And yeah, it was around sexual abuse and providing First Nations women a way to communicate and to get help and to reach out. And in this particular instance, I just felt that the solution was so inadequate, and it triggered me. And instantly I felt this rage and emotion and tapped out of the meeting. And I remember talking to my staff member at the time saying, yeah, this is definitely trauma coming through.
Mm-hmm.
I can't do this meeting. We're going to need to either drop the client or we're going to need to find, because this isn't going to help my mum. This isn't going to help, women who are suffering. So stuff like that is the things that have come to the fore. And then certainly being a father, issues with my absent father have come through, like separation anxiety with my own son.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's people say, oh, there's no such thing. And it's like, wow, until you experience it, you're like, yeah, that's a thing.
You mentioned your mum was thrown into that scenario, being part of the stolen gen, and she didn't know what love was. But yeah, from everything we've learned about your mum through you, like she had so much love to give.
Yeah.
And she did want to find out, who she was, where she came from. Can you tell us a bit about that journey of self-discovery that she had and which led you guys to connecting back to country?
Yeah, Mum went through a bit of a spiritual awakening, I guess. Through that, she kind of made a conscious decision, like, right, even in the words I remember her saying, no stone unturned, effectively. She would write to the priest who was in charge of her welfare and all the other kids, of asking for information, asking for photo proof, asking for anything, because they just got rid of all the records. So you can imagine growing up and, you don't even have a driver's license or anything that says, I think Mum had about 5 different last names until we found her real last name a couple of years before she passed, just to show you that journey. But yeah, in short, Mum would write to people, really, she wouldn't stop. And she finally got a response, and we were able to facilitate a journey back to country through Link Up, which is an organisation that helps, particularly, I guess, in our case, stolen gen families reconnect with country. So Mum at that time was not well and she couldn't do the trip back to country, but me and Laura, my sisters, did. We visited the site where she was sent initially in Darwin, and the First Nations woman who facilitated the process was able to talk to us about some of the experiences that the kids would have felt, what native plants and things were around, which they would naturally try and aid their colds and coughs and things, or, you know, things that they'd turn into cordials, or, you know, like ways in which to survive. And then she, facilitated the link up with elders in Darwin, some women's business, which my sisters attended, and then finally down to country, which is 12 hours south of Darwin. So literally you have to beat the sun to get to country before it gets too dark. And that's where we met elders. We had one photo that we were able to get, and that shows grandma, my mother, and my aunt the day that they were taken.
Yeah, wow.
And we showed that photo to elders in community, and tears came pretty quick. I knew your mother, I knew your grandmother, I remember that. And then, we knew we were home. So that's kind of what led us back. And, you know, a lot of First Nations people will say this about country because of the connection. You know, as soon as we took our shoes off and I just grounded my feet on Gurindji country, my grandmother was just a feeling she was there. Like I had never felt that in my life. And I knew, we're in the right place. And it's been pretty amazing since too, to have that relationship.
Yeah, the story hits home. I almost feel like any First Nations person can do some amazing doco, to be honest. Like the story is just like it's moving. Very sad, but yeah.
And I think any culture that, you know, values family so much, you know, the thought of someone intervening and separating you like that, I think that's the point where Australians connect with the story, that we go, no, that's just wrong. Like, you don't mess with someone's family.
Yeah.
Like, you know, these are the innocent children, no matter the colour of your skin. But that's happened twice in my family. There's nothing short of slavery. So it's 3 generations of women in my family. Like, for what? You know, for the colour of their skin? Makes me boil.
Like hearing you say that makes me feel so much more grateful for having my family. And it's weird, like in today's world, it feels like, and I don't mean to speak for everybody, but it just feels like the world we live in, sort of take family for granted.
Yeah.
And you only really get to realize just, you know, how important and powerful it is to have family when you hear a story like that.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people haven't had their family taken from them like that as
Yeah.
well. Yeah. You've got your own son as well. How old is Levi now?
Levi's 11.
11.
Yeah.
Bloody hell.
Yeah.
Time flies.
I know.
He's probably almost as tall as you two by now.
Yeah, he's tall. He's growing.
Yeah. How does he feel about his culture at the moment, being a young person? Obviously, through the stories that you've told him, is he started to connect with it, or is he still a bit too young, or is he... does he want to learn more? Or
I think what we've seen in some of the changes at school have been really important. Like, you know, Auntie Diker has been out there each year to do a welcome to country ceremony and smoking. And I sat through, I think, her last one there, and just heard her share some of her story and talk about the importance of the land and how we should treat the land because we're a part of it. So I think for him, him hearing those stories firsthand from someone like that is, you know, something we never had. And they celebrate that. So, you know, classrooms are named with Wurundjeri words and meanings. This is off the back of him starting to understand his own. So he knows the story of Grandma and spent, you know, 10 years with Grandma before she passed. I don't know about you, but if you observed kids today, they don't have the hang-ups of yesterday that we kind of had. And like talking to him about the referendum or talking to him about, you know, equal rights and equal treatment, he's like, yeah, well, that, of course. Like it's they don't get it.
They haven't been affected by societal biases and stuff that we. Because when I was in school, like I had the same thing. There was a lack of education about Indigenous community and culture. There was a bit of it, but it was mainly about, you know, Captain Cook coming. And for me, I honestly learned more about Indigenous history and culture from when I started working with you in 2018 than I ever did in school. It broke down a lot of misconceptions for me, and I learned so much in a small space of time. And that's why we're stoked to have you here today, because we think it's a great opportunity to break down some of those misconceptions that are, you know, purely just because people might not know or they haven't been exposed to Indigenous culture. But, you know,
Yeah.
now we've been able to work on jobs with you with the likes of Uncle Jack Charles and Uncle Bill Nicholson and Auntie Pam and all these amazing storytellers, and hear the adversity that they've been through, but also how they've come out of it, and they're still able to crack a cheeky joke and have a laugh as well. Some of the most cheekiest people I've ever met.
It just shows the character of these people. Like, and you're right on that point. Like, Mum, right up until the end. I mean, you were at a funeral, which, you know, I really appreciated, Vin. Like, you know, she said, my story, my life is about a story of hope. You know, despite what I've been through, despite all the things that have caused me such pain, my family such pain, I want my story to be a story of hope. And to me, that seems so prevalent in a lot of these people that we've interviewed over the time. And, you know, it's so very easy to succumb to all of that. I mean, we've never walked those shoes. We don't know what it's like to go through that fire. And yet they come out, and then there you are, and they're full of smiles. The cheeky, you know, nature is so wonderful. And, you know, I think that really speaks to something that I'm really proud of, that we wrote about Gen 26, is that they tried to wipe us out, but we're still here. Here we are. We're 3% of the population, but you didn't wipe us out. We're still here. And I think that talks to the testament of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people 65,000 years later.
And just with, you know, Jan 26, do you think you'd see a change in that date before you'd get a treaty, or do you think?
I definitely think the movement's on around Jan 26. Certainly the rally that, you know, Vin joined us on as well. That seemed much bigger each year. Like this year, there was obviously a large support from the Palestinian community, which was lovely to see, and the unions, as they do each year. I think as the generational change takes place, where we see, you know, the Gen X, Gen Ys move into the places of power and position of change, I think that's when we'll probably see the most change in our lifetime. We're seeing local councils, you know, identify they're not going to acknowledge January 26, setting up other festivals and opportunities all around the country. I was lucky to enjoy that in Fremantle a couple of years ago, and what they do down there was amazing. And it's getting louder amongst allies, which is where it's got to come from as well. You know, like it can't be just a cultural load every time for First Nations people to stand up and say, look, we want to, how are we celebrating it on this day, you know, when so many atrocities happened. But now the voice of allies, I think, are getting louder. So, yeah, I'm hopeful.
I was there with you on Jan 26th at the rally at Parliament, and just to see the turnout of Indigenous and non-Indigenous people, it was interesting because I saw all of the Clothing the Gaps merch and all of that, even on the train getting in. And I saw maybe a couple of Aussie flags, and I had such weird mixed emotions seeing that, because I see a couple of old blokes, you know, waving the Aussie flag, and I get it, but I'm in such a different place now than I was 10 years ago. You know, I would have been celebrating Australia Day with my mates, wearing the Aussie flag, listening to Triple J's Hottest 100. But since the education's happened for me and I've learned more about that, like we are the only country in the world that celebrates the day of colonisation. which is a day of mourning for our First Nations people. But then people are so set in their ways, and this is Australia Day. We should be united as one country. But Indigenous people can't celebrate that day because it's a day of atrocity.
Yeah, yeah. I'm with you, Vin. Like growing up, I'd celebrate Australia Day and didn't think twice about it until going through that journey and seeing, exactly what that represented. I mean, we haven't had it on that day for that long either. The significance of it, though, but it's the insidious part of a country celebrating such pain and just thinking nothing of it. Get over it, I mean, I get the old guy on the train with his Australia flag. Like in his day, that meant probably something very different, It probably means legacy around their contribution, through war or through hard work and values that, we've been led to feel and breathe about Australia. But it's interesting that there is the old version of Australia celebrating when so many people on the train are going, you know what, that's not all that Australia is known for. That's not all we do. I saw some really interesting viral TikToks about what are the characteristics of being Australian. And people were saying, mateship and all these kind of things.
Fair, easygoing.
Easygoing, yeah.
I think I know what you're going to say.
Well, but one of the guys who had, I think, posted this was saying, yeah, but you can find that everywhere. Like that's not distinct to Australia. And it just kind of went on. And as you look down the comments, it became more and more evident that, well, what is it to be Australian? Because these are all attributes of other countries as well. They're not unique to Australia. What is unique to Australia is, our First Nations history. The fact that we have only country in the world to have 2 Indigenous populations. And, we talk about the pyramids and we talk about all the amazing places around the world, Our First Nations people predate that by tens of thousands of years. We've got something to be so proud of, and something for all Australians to enjoy. I think that's sort of a message that hasn't been talked about enough, is that you might have come here from another country, you may have, settled here, wherever that story started for you. If Australia's your home, well, these are your people. The Gurindji are your people. Like, you can enjoy that as part of your proud history to be Australian. Like, why haven't we celebrated that narrative? That's powerful. Like, the struggle and coming out the other end, and now we're the generation that are going to be part of this healing and change. So kind of missed opportunity, I reckon. But yeah, it was an interesting day in how it's represented, and I am hopeful that Australians will look to change that soon.
We'd love to talk to you about the recent referendum, the Voice to Parliament for Indigenous Community. My understanding of it was a voice, Indigenous voice or voices in Parliament to represent Indigenous community on issues that affect Indigenous community only. Would I be correct in saying that?
Yeah, it was a governing voice that would help guide Parliament on matters that pertain to First Nations people. There are many of these advisory bodies in Australia. It's no different.
Yeah.
But it was politicised and it was turned into something really ugly in the end.
Yeah. I felt, given the fact that non-Indigenous Australia was able to vote on things that only affect Indigenous people, I sort of felt like that was voting again for gay marriage. I'm gay myself, and I was sort of like, well, why should people decide matters that only affect you as a person and your community? But there are Indigenous people that wanted to vote no. For example, the Jan 26 rally at Parliament, there was a girl that got up and spoke, and she said that she voted no without question, and that we can shove our reconciliation up our ass.
Yeah.
Why would some Indigenous community want to vote no?
Yeah, I mean, I was there, and it's something that I've heard through various channels of that we work in and privy to. From where I'm sitting, I think there was a divide around the construct of the colonial construct. So if we look at Australia, you know, it was invaded. You know, let's not sugarcoat things. For 100+ years, there've been wars, and we still don't recognise them. But Australia's first frontier wars, and effectively, what happens after an invasion? Most countries have formed a treaty. Australia hasn't done that, and we're the only colonised country in the world without a treaty. So without that apparatus, the Aboriginal people have never ceded the country. So they've never ceded this land. So I guess the premise is that a lot of Aboriginal people see that this government is a false government. It's based on the stealing of land and the stealing of culture and country, where it's never been addressed. There's no treaty in place, so Aboriginal people are walking around today still saying, well, this is still our land. We don't recognise your government. We don't recognise that Union Jack. That's not we've been here 65,000 years. You've been here 200. What do you mean? Like, it's so out of proportion. So I think for a lot of Aboriginal people and Torres Strait Islander people that opposed it, it was coming from probably what I read into it, a position that, how can we talk about a voice to Parliament when there's no treaty in place, when we're still on lands haven't been given back, when reparations haven't been made. So to which I don't disagree. I firmly believe there needs to be treaty and there needs to be truth telling, and that was evident through the referendum. Australia hasn't dealt with the truth yet. There's so many parts to it we haven't. But I guess where I differed from that, and a lot of Aboriginal people were hoping for, was that it, I guess, feels impossible to deconstruct such a construct that has roots everywhere now, and that forms the day-to-day of our lives, the legal system, the welfare system, the education system. I mean, I saw the referendum as a way, the voice as a way to propel First Nations voices to Parliament to represent the interests of First Nations people within this construct. I agree with the other First Nations people that identify it as a false construct. Absolutely. I don't dispute that this land hasn't been ceded. It hasn't. It's Aboriginal land and always will be, and that a treaty needs to be put in place. But, I'm looking at the change in our lifetime and the change that we could try and achieve. And to me, this was a government that seemed to be have good intentions around trying to create a voice that would, give Aboriginal people the ability to govern their own destiny, self-determination, through, programs that we could see real help in. So, yeah, we got heavily involved with the Yes campaign. We had the honour of working with Rachel Perkins. Both her father and my mother were at Semaphore Boys Home together, and to see, like, we talk about hope, 20, 30 years later, here am I working with her. I think our parents would be pretty chuffed at that, and I certainly was. I was a big fan of Rachel's, and yeah.
You and the Little Rocket team were part of the big Yes mural outside Clothing the Gaps. You worked in collaboration with Clothing the Gaps. That was a really special day. I had the pleasure of being there while you guys spray painted this huge mural outside of Clothing the Gaps in Brunswick. to be there that day with your team, it was just such a beautiful display of camaraderie, and everyone just got together. And I think you guys turned that round in a few days, didn't you?
Couple of days, yeah.
Yeah,
Sort of
yeah.
had the idea and then pitched it to Laura and Sarah there, and they were like, "Yeah, that sounds good." And then both teams got together, and the team from Homey as well represented. Yeah, it was. I told the team that was probably one of the proudest moments in Little Rocket's history. But yes, last year, seeing that, just everyone jumping in.
And despite the result, that was just such a beautiful thing for you and your team to put together.
Yeah.
And sort of to rise above it as well.
Yeah.
Obviously, apart from super disappointed, but how did you feel when you heard the result?
It kind of confirmed some of the suspicions that we have about our country, that we aren't united in many ways around race relations and around equality. We talk about the fair go for everyone. And for a lot of people who have come from overseas and created homes in Australia, there aren't wars, there's prosperity, there's opportunity. So in a lot of ways, I think for especially maybe the migrant community to Australia, there would have been a bit of a disconnect there around the narrative. But I also think, surely they know what it's like to be dispossessed. They know what it's like to be persecuted. What we're seeing at the moment with the Palestinians as well, they know what colonization's like and the effects of it. I felt disappointed, yeah. It certainly emotionally took a blow. All the remote communities and the pockets of First Nations communities that were speculated not to want the voice voted 75, 80%, yes. And the scare tactics and the politicization of the issues, it affected that process deeply. But a lot of it was lies, there were so many claims made about that. And, there we are looking at the results. Although there was a no vote on majority, you looked at the corridors where there were yeses, and it was all matching on those remote from First Nations communities. They did support it. They did want change.
Do you feel that you'll have the opportunity to see the change you want to see in your lifetime?
Yeah, I wondered about that. I often use my mum as a barometer on the impact of change, and we just, yesterday was the anniversary, the 16th anniversary of the apology, and she didn't think she'd see that in her time. And I remember holding her hand in my apartment as we watched Kevin Rudd do that, tears running down her face, what that meant. Because the biggest thing that she said to me was that it's an acknowledgement that my life means something and that it's not a lie. They've tried to get rid of us and, tear up our records and like we don't exist. This proves that we exist. This proves and shows the world that we're not lying, that this stuff happened to us and on a deliberate genocidal level, like we've seen in other parts of the world. So I reflected on whether I think, now in my time, whether we'll see treaty, whether we'll see significant change. And I think the indicators that I see with children, my children now, are evidence for me that, yep, he's growing up not with the Captain Cook narrative, not with the lies that were peddled for so many generations of governments, but this appreciation of country, this appreciation of culture, this respect, that is at the core of Aboriginal culture. And to me, seeing that manifest in ways, through decolonisation of places, opportunities for First Nations people that weren't there previously, generation one of Aboriginal business owners, they're all markers of change. And I think, we're seeing that. Whether we'll get, significant change like what was recently attempted, I don't know. I think Australia's got a long way to go in understanding or going through that truth-telling process. Yeah.
So there's welcome to country and there's also acknowledgement of country. What's the difference between those two? And is it sort of disrespectful for anyone who's not Indigenous to perform either of them?
Yeah. So Welcome to Country is based on Australia is divided into hundreds of different nations, tribal groups, that when you would go into someone else's country, just like probably in the likes of Africa or in other places around the world, you had to have safe passage. You had to avail yourself. I am, you know, Tyrone Jones from blah, blah, blah. I'm coming into your country. I request safe passage. These are my intentions while I'm here. So that welcome to country was a way of going, okay, I see who you are, identify who you are. I'm happy with you coming and enjoying our country while you're here. It's like our passport system now. And I give you permission. Whilst you're here, tread lightly. Take care of the country as if it was your own. That's the kind of historical aspect of a welcome to country. So now, in a modern sense, that has to be performed from someone who's from that country. So I'm a Gurindji man on Wurundjeri country. I can't perform a welcome to country, but I can perform an acknowledgement to country just like you guys can, which is basically just identifying that we're guests on this land. We acknowledge the Wurundjeri people as the traditional owners. We pay our respects to their elders, and that we will take care of the place while we're here. That's really the exchange of both of those customs. Yeah.
We hear a lot of acknowledgements of country now, everywhere. So before podcasts, before meetings, before events, do you, in your personal opinion, is that comforting for an Indigenous person, or do you think that a lot of businesses or organisations are just trying to tick a box?
I do feel comforted and safer when that takes place, because to me, it sets the tone of respect. And I think I've experienced that from other cultures. We witnessed that with certain cultures like, say, the Japanese, or, some of those Asian communities who very respectful to each other, in their homes and their customs and things. And that kind of reminds me of that sort of process. So when I enter into a meeting, it tells me that they're aware and their intentions are good. We definitely see some tick the box activity. I think the thing with that is that it soon becomes kind of evident that the words and the language don't match the actions. So I think you're always going to get that. But I think for those people, those organizations doing that, there are more checks and balances these days, where, that can have ramifications with their RAP process, like we've seen with some of the large organizations. But yeah, but largely I think when that's been happening, I think it's a lovely, respectful custom that, all Australians are invited to be a part of.
So we spoke earlier about allies. Could you, just for our listeners, could you explain what they are and what they can do to help Indigenous people?
Yeah, I guess allies typically refers to anyone who's not First Nations and who believe that in the principles, I guess, of equality, and regardless of race, skin, belief, that we as humans should be able to have the same rights. And so, a lot of Australia, I feel, has been sort of rooted in that notion. But when it comes to, that actually means about stuff that we've done as a country, and how to stand in solidarity, I feel like there's a really positive move on with non-First Nations people around this issue. It's similar to what we've seen in other countries, like, where people from all races understand and have that empathy around the tenets of a civil society, like, and a lot of them are, rooted in that sort of do unto me as I do unto you, and I'm not going to steal your stuff, and I'm not going to discriminate you, or just because of who you pray to, or the skin, or, color of your skin, sexuality, whatever it is. So the ally movement has been really positive to see. And of course, our young ones, I think they get it more than anything. Like they don't see, what are you guys talking about? This is a no-brainer, right? Like it's how you treat someone. So
Yeah.
that's allyship to me.
It's good to see, especially what you say about the young ones, because it's all in the education, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So change is coming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And what can allies do to support and get around Indigenous community?
Yeah, I think like you say, it starts with education, right? The No campaign preyed on that. If you don't know, vote no. I mean, let's apply that to everything else in what we do, and how would that turn out for us? It's just that apathy, like, yeah, I don't know about my car, so I'm not going to get it fixed. Well, how's that going to end up for you? Like, it's just such a disappointing proposition. Whereas I guess what we're saying to the allies is like, read some of these books on First Nations history, watch a couple of these docos, get yourself sort of educated around what happened, because we've been told lies for so long that it became the syllabus. We all went to school and we all experienced it. That's what we were all taught. Now that we know the truth, or starting to know the truth, then I think it's up to allies to go, step one, let's understand the perspective. Let's understand what happened. I think then the other kind of steps are to reach out. I think a lot of Australians don't have First Nations relationships in certain sections of the country, and so therefore it's so foreign to them. They just don't understand it from a personal perspective. But given just even Vinny's account, like, I mean, Vinny went on a hyper learning journey with me in that, and I wouldn't have done it with anyone else. It was beautiful, but I was thinking, geez, this is some new stuff for me, and I'm going through this. This is like all getting thrown at Vin. But we always drove back from those things saying that was just such an honor to sit down and hear this guy's story about pretty dark stuff, like you said, and then know that that's part of Australia's story, that's Australia's fabric, and then wanting to do something about it. So I think it's education, it's listening, and then it's action. So now that you know the truth, now that you know what's happened, and why there's such a problem in so many areas, what are we going to do about it? Aboriginal people and Torres Strait Islander people want to work side by side with Australians to celebrate a day that we all can celebrate, to work together towards better conditions for everyone. The translation of my of the Gurindji country, Gurindji people's festival is blackfella, whitefella work together, come together. This is a people that strike for 8 years to get their land back off the government, and were the first to do so, who had such incredible atrocities against them, and yet they're saying in their festival that they celebrate every year, come together. If they can do that, then the wider Australia, I think, take up the invitation. So yeah, educate, listen, and act.
One way that we can celebrate Indigenous culture, both Indigenous and non-Indigenous people, is NAIDOC Week. Can you tell us a little bit about NAIDOC Week and what that represents?
Yeah, I think for a lot of Aboriginal Australians, it's become that sort of replacement. That's the national week that we celebrate. The progress that Aboriginal people have made, and so there's a lot of activity in that space. There's the NAIDOC balls, and there's we do a lot of work with clients around education pieces or cultural pieces for that week. So it's usually a week where the reminder of the First Nations struggle, I guess, to get those simple rights and improve Aboriginal way of life are recognised and represented through, again, like, which is prominent in Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander culture, is, to acknowledge our elders, to acknowledge their contribution. But that's usually what, it's probably the most prominent week in the calendar for First Nations people.
We spoke about intergenerational trauma, but we also spoke yesterday about intergenerational change. I hadn't heard that expression before until you brought it up. But you're now creating so much change in the social impact space for Indigenous community and just community in general through the work that Little Rocket does. Can you tell us about the inception of Little Rocket and how it sort of came to be? 14 years ago, was it?
Yeah, 14 years this year. So intergenerational change, I've seen someone talk about this where generations in a family kind of go like a bell curve, where there's adversity and then struggle and then sacrifice that leads to prosperity, and then adversity again, and then back and up and back again. So when I thought of that, I thought, well, yeah, the sacrifices that Mum made gave me the gift through quite a hard childhood to then invest in education and then find a way to work back on First Nations thing to then give back to my family, so that Levi is at the top of that bell again, and he has the opportunity to be aware of all of that, but not live with the genocide, not live with the abuse, not live with, he can go back to country whenever he wants. He can learn the language if he wants. He can, he's free of a lot of those things that have held my family back in that regard. So intergenerational change, I think we're seeing that in many ways. And for me, I was a, marketing sort of PR comms guy, had worked in the sector for a while. Nothing had really kind of floated my boat, and then really I just had a bunch of friends who were good creatives and digital guys and video guys and stuff like that. So there was a point where I just wanted to make the jump and went into Little Rocket and tried to build that up. And then for the first, 5 years, I think it was just, me working with my mates in that capacity, trying to make things meet. But then it wasn't until I reconnected with David, our creative director, who's lived on Mum's country for 2 years, and we had the opportunity to work on the 50th anniversary of the Freedom Day festival up there in Gurindji, and met a First Nations woman there who gave us our first piece of work in that space, and was then availed to this whole social procurement process. And I said, what do you mean? Like, there's this federal and state apparatus that is designed to try and drive more opportunity towards disadvantaged groups, one of them being First Nations, obviously. And I was saying, so you mean I could do what I really love doing, marketing, comms, strategy, design, all this creative stuff, I could do that for my community? And to me, I was like, oh my God, this is the dream, So I pivoted the business very quickly. I remember doing it because I had to get all these checks and balances, and I had to pay for this and that, which I didn't have to before. And bang, opened the floodgates, and we've been growing ever since. And I get to honour my mother and my grandmother every day with what we're doing. Like, we'd go back from these shoots just thinking it doesn't feel like work. Mm-hmm. It feels like I was given something. And that's the beauty of this. I think the whole team would say that their day-to-day is, it's an agency. We've got a lot on, there's deadlines, there's things, demands and that, but they can look at their work and go, I played some part in that, The Little Rocket journey is all about honouring my mum and my grandmother's legacy. It's an absolute honour. I say this to my team all the time, that if people could unlock the power around giving, they would understand that the joy of that process, that it's not about losing something, but it genuinely transcends difficulties we have in connecting and difficulties we have in making an impact. Again, the tenet of giving and gratitude is the foundation of Little Rocket. It's touched my life a lot, and I hope that the team will continue to grow in that way, because it's a really good place to work from.
I believe, I'm a strong believer of that too. And when you give, and giving with an open hand, not a closed, it comes back.
Yeah.
It comes back. And because when you give with the open hand, you feel that gratitude.
Yeah.
That's where it's coming from.
Yeah.
And we all know gratitude is appreciation, and that's how you attract more into your life. So without condition. It's not a surprise how well Little Rocket is doing on those fronts.
I hope that we continue down that path, because that's the core of where I think you find your moral compass is around, those kind of characteristics around giving and being grateful. And I know the team are, and they do over and beyond all the time. It's incredibly enriching and very proud thing that I get to experience every day when I see that.
And I think that's the universe giving that back to you, because you've put that out there, and now you've got an amazing team. So well done, you.
Oh, thanks, mate.
I do believe that that's what you put out there. You put that love, that positive energy, that care out there, and you get that back from your amazing team as well. I think that's a reflection on the type of person you are. So
Thanks,
you're an
mate.
amazing leader, and you can see that that's reflected in the love that your staff have for you. So it's beautiful for us to be part of that as well, as we share the office space together.
Yeah. That feels like when we move to this place, it feels like a really new home that we could all feel comfortable in, being ourselves. So it wasn't too pretentious, but being able to do what we could do, and having
frolic.
Yes. Being absolutely silly. People kick the balls. There's so much that goes on here. So I've loved the journey with you guys too, and it's to see where we might be this year. It'll be really, really interesting.
From us looking into your space, like, you're very successful in everything that you're doing. For you personally, what does success look like in your eyes?
Yeah, I definitely think success is defined by the impact that you can make on your community and your surrounds. I think a lot of people my age and younger who are going through the ranks in corporate life and in organisations, that whole corporate ladder Australian dream thing is a thing of the past. It's not relevant, and it's rooted in a lot of it, about you and what you want, and it's very hyper, all about you centered. But I think what we find is that success comes from the relationships, the people that you work with, the impact that you can make through your craft. So that's going to be your legacy. That's what your children are going to talk about. It's what people are going to talk about you when you've left and no one cares about you anymore. Let's face it. One day you wake up and you're not here. We're never promised a day, but it's what you do with that day. And for me, seeing this place and seeing, the people who are here and what we're able to achieve, I feel incredibly successful.
Touching on initiatives and projects, there's a lot of other corporations out there wanting to form connections with Indigenous communities.
Yeah.
What sort of advice would you give to any other business seeking to form authentic partnership with First Nations people?
Connect with the people the lands in which you are operating. So seeking out a member of the Wurundjeri, certainly, their leaders, we've had the opportunity to film before, and those times have been very enriching, very learning. So I know that they're limited with their time, but it might not be an elder, but it might be someone in community where you can just say, hey, this is where I'm at in my journey, and this is the journey we're at with my organisation. But we want to understand more. That yarning circle kind of comes to mind with that introduction. It's a time where, ancient time where you arrest time, and because you're in a circle, you're Socratically kind of connecting. You can't help but look into someone's eyes and be connecting and talking to them. Yeah, time kind of stops, and often uncle or auntie will start telling that story or talk to you about things that they want can share. And I think that that's a real sacred experience, which it's not rocket science. It's like family life, when around the table and when you're eating food. But I think as a fast culture, we've lost that in a lot of ways. We want everything now, and I don't know what that's about. It's too hard. But those opportunities where you can start to actually have a relationship and connection, and I think it's that second part, deep listening, going, all right, I've got the afternoon, I'm here with uncle, auntie, talk to me about stuff. I'd love to talk to you about some stuff I'm dealing with, So
Put the time
yeah,
in.
yeah,
Put the time in. Yeah.
yeah. I think that's a really important part to start. And then, making a culturally safe place, so that people can identify that they're values that you believe in as well.
Looking forward, what are some of your hopes and aspirations for the future of Indigenous representation within Australian media and marketing?
Yeah, it's a good one. Well, we've been working with, TAG, who are recently acquired by Dentsu, in their reconciliation journey, and that's involved, some of their executive coming out on country and experiencing it themselves, which I've been really, it's been a real joy to go through that journey with them and see then how those principles are affecting the way they think about how they go about it. And, this year we're hoping to have our first 2 First Nations people go through a pathway program that we've been building with TAG, and a number of other agencies, where it'll give them the opportunity to experience agency life in Sydney for a week, all paid and expenses, from account management to digital to marketing and design, whatever it might be. But for a lot of us to have that insight before we studied or went into that thing would have been really helpful. So we're hoping that this program would help these 2 people that we've identified in that journey, so that we see more First Nations people in the advertising industry representing. There is a common term which I've used, like Generation 1, that refers to a lot of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders now who can own land, speak their language, start businesses, all these things, which you think, surely they've been able to do that for years, and it hasn't been that long. There was because our parents weren't allowed to do that. In my case, though, parents were taken away. There's no example. So you might say, oh, well, I went into automotive because Dad was a mechanic and he taught me all about it when I was growing up. There's none of that because we weren't allowed to do it. So
there was no integration. Yeah.
No. We were just denied equal rights, ownership, anything. So my generation is that first one, and people older than me, but so we're starting to see a lot more, representation. If you think about like how many Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are represented through the traditional outlets of sport and art, per capita, per head, for a country like Australia, I mean, that's phenomenal. How many Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander guys are playing football, at the elite level, with the, I mean, it's just amazing to see how but now we're seeing that in business. Now we're seeing that in entertainment. Now we're seeing that in construction. There's so many success stories and so many great stories to talk about. So that's what I mean when we sort of talked about sort of markers in change. When you see that, you think, that's happened. It's moving. It's now business as usual.
Given what you know now, what would you say to your younger self? What would you say to little JB?
Yeah. Be brave. Yep. There's just so many factors and things around you when you're growing up that sow a seed of doubt, and it's really hard to overcome that when it's so strong, and there's real reasons for why you should doubt, want it, or would doubt. But I'd say to that pretty strong-headed young guy, just continue to be brave. Take the risks, the measured risks that will lead you down a path regardless, whether you do nothing or you don't. So why not back yourself? And to always just remember that, people come first. It's how you treat people in this life that I think will be the marker of your character and your legacy. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely reflected in the work that you do every day and within your team, because you put people first, and that's why like all of your team like love you so much as a boss. You're not just their boss. You're also a mentor and a friend as well. So I think that's a really beautiful thing. And we're really proud of you and Little Rocket and everything that you continue to achieve.
And
over
how
the
far
years.
you've come, yeah.
Thank you guys. Appreciate it. That means a lot.
We're stoked to be a part of that journey with you, and we get to come into work every day and work closely with your team as if we're all one.
Yeah.
So
it's great to see, and I wouldn't. Yeah, that's what I mean. Like sometimes it's you're in different journeys or you're doing different things or there's some interest, but that cohesion can benefit everyone, and that's been the beautiful part about our journey.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And it's been an honor to have you here today as well.
Thanks,
so
mate.
Thank you so much for telling your story. It's always beautiful to hear about your journey and where you are now. And
for always being so open too,
and raw and vulnerable as well. Yeah. And also just to learn more about Indigenous history, because we're still learning every day, and we really wanted to have the opportunity to get you on to talk about some of those things, just to some people don't have that exposure or have that understanding because they're not around First Nations people. So thank you for giving us that information and for sharing that part of your life with us as well.
But not just to us, to the viewers too. Because that's it. Like we said, the education piece is so powerful. This is a big part of why we're doing it too. Is that creating that awareness? So
no, not a problem. Appreciate the opportunity, and I love you guys. So.
Love you, mate. Thanks,
buddy. Cheers, man.
Thanks for listening to In Depth and In Focus. Your support is greatly appreciated. So if you want to hear more from us and our guests, please hit subscribe.